I don't need permission to be powerful. I make my own rules. Success isn't just about reaching the top, it's about staying true to who you are while you climb. People are not disturbed by things but by the views they take of them. That's what the ancient philosopher Epictetus once said. And today, more than ever, it still rings true. When we deal with difficult people, those who drain our energy, push our buttons, or just seem impossible to reason with, it's easy to believe they are the source of our stress. But what if the real secret lies not in changing them, but in changing how we choose to see and respond to them? Let's be honest. Difficult people are everywhere. They show up in our families, at our jobs, even in line at the coffee shop. Some interrupt, some criticize, some manipulate. But if we look closely, we begin to see a pattern. These people are often acting out of pain, insecurity, or fear. Not that this excuses their behavior. It doesn't, but it helps us understand it. And understanding is the first step toward wisdom. People are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. That truth reminds us that the way we see others often reflects what's happening inside us. And this is especially true when it comes to difficult people. Here's the strange and powerful thing. Difficult people are often a mirror, not of who we are at our best, but of the emotions we struggle to manage, our impatience, our pride, our need to be right, our fear of being judged. Think about it. The person who talks over you might stir up old feelings of not being heard. The one who criticizes everything may awaken your own insecurity, your secret fear that maybe they're right. The manipulator might echo a time when someone used guilt to control you, and you didn't know how to fight back. Their behavior pushes our buttons, not just because of what they're doing, but because of what it stirs up in us. This doesn't mean the other person isn't behaving poorly. It just means our reaction isn't only about them. We're reacting to a story, our story. And unless we recognize that, we stay stuck in the same emotional patterns. We blame them. We get angry. We try to fix them. But none of that works, because the real change has to happen in us first. There's a saying in psychology, if it's hysterical, it's historical. In other words, if our reaction feels bigger than the moment calls for, if it's full of rage or fear, or deep hurt, it's probably tapping into something from our past. Difficult people are often just the match. The firewood was already there, and when we understand that, we shift from blaming to reflecting. We begin to ask, why is this bothering me so much? What's the real wound here? That's not weakness. That's not weakness. That's courage. In those moments, the difficult person becomes something more than a frustration. They become a signal, a teacher, a mirror.
Not one we asked for, but one we might need.
They reflect parts of ourselves we haven't fully faced. And sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the people who annoy us the most. Not because they're right, but because they reveal something unhealed in us. This doesn't mean we excuse bad behavior. It means we stop giving it power. We use it instead. Every emotional reaction is a chance to understand ourselves more deeply. The difficult person gives us that chance, not by being right, but by showing us where we still have work to do. So before we try to change them, correct them, or cut them out, maybe we can pause and ask, what are they showing me about myself? Because in that pause we stop being controlled. We start becoming conscious, and consciousness, awareness, is the first step toward true strength. Responding rather than reacting is the key to de-escalating conflict, because how we choose to act in moments of tension can either add fuel to the fire or begin to cool things down. It may seem like a small difference, responding versus reacting, but in reality that gap is where all our power lies. A reaction is immediate, automatic, and often emotional. It's the flash of anger when someone insults us, the defensive tone when we feel misunderstood, the sarcastic reply when we're hurt. It feels justified in the moment, but it almost always escalates the situation. A response, on the other hand, comes from a place of clarity. It's slower, more thoughtful, and often more powerful, because it reflects a choice rather than a reflex. Let's take a closer look at what happens when we react. Imagine you're in a meeting at work, and someone criticizes your idea in front of others. If you react, you might snap back with a defensive comment or shut down completely. Maybe your voice tightens, your heart races, and before you know it, the energy in the room has shifted. Tension rises, walls go up, nothing productive happens after that. But if you respond, you take a breath, you let the moment pass through you, without letting it hijack your voice. You might say, "I see your concern. Can you explain what part of the idea you're unsure about?" That one sentence shifts the energy entirely. Instead of turning the moment into a battle, you've turned it into a bridge. Responding gives us the ability to guide a conversation instead of being dragged by it. It's the difference between holding the wheel of a car and being pulled by the current of the road. And what makes it powerful is not that it always wins the moment, but that it preserves our peace and protects our values. When we react, we often hand our emotional control over to the other person. Their anger becomes our anger, their tone becomes our tone. But when we respond, we take that power back. We decide what kind of energy we want to bring to the conversation. This doesn't mean pretending we aren't angry or pretending we're okay when we're not. In fact, responding often requires that we're deeply honest about what we feel, but it also asks us to hold those feelings with care.
Not to deny them, but to manage them.
Emotional regulation is not emotional suppression. It's the ability to feel anger without letting anger drive our behavior. It's feeling hurt without becoming hurtful. And this skill, like all skills, can be practiced. One of the simplest ways to begin is by creating space between the stimulus and the response. That space might be just a breath, or a pause before you speak, or a simple phrase like, "Let me think about that for a moment." The cha-cha. That space is where wisdom lives. It's where we get to ask ourselves, what do I actually want out of this situation? Do I want to be right? Or do I want to be effective? Do I want to win the argument? Or do I want to keep the relationship? These are hard questions in the heat of the moment, but they are questions worth asking. Because conflict is rarely about the surface. More often it's about how people feel. Disrespected, unseen, misunderstood, threatened. When we respond with curiosity instead of criticism, we often uncover the real issue beneath the surface. And once that issue is named, the energy begins to shift. Think of any great communicator you admire, whether a leader, a teacher, or someone in your personal life. They don't avoid conflict, but they navigate it differently. They stay grounded while others rise in emotion. They listen even when they disagree. They use calm language to de-escalate, instead of matching tone for tone. That's not because they don't feel triggered. It's because they've learned the art of restraint. They know that strength is not shown by how loud you speak, but by how well you listen. and how clearly you think under pressure. In many ways, reacting is the easy path. It's the path of impulse. But responding is the stronger path. The one that requires discipline, patience, and humility. It's saying, I'm not going to let this moment define me. I'm going to define this moment by how I show up in it. That doesn't mean letting people walk over you. It means choosing your battles wisely, standing your ground without losing your grace, and refusing to let chaos pull you out of character. There's a great image often used in mindfulness practice. Imagine your emotions as waves on the surface of the ocean. A reaction is like a tiny boat tossed around by the waves, easily capsized. But a response is like an anchor dropped beneath the surface, steady, grounded, unmoved by the storm above. When we learn to respond, we become that anchor. We become the calm in the room, and people notice. Often the mere presence of someone who refuses to escalate is enough to change the tone of an entire conversation. Of course, this takes practice. Some days we'll get it right. Other days we'll fall into old patterns. That's okay. The goal isn't perfection. It's progress. Every time we choose to respond instead of react, we're training our minds and hearts to operate with intention. We're building resilience, empathy, and emotional intelligence. And over time we start to notice the changes in how we feel inside. We're less strained, less anxious, more confident, because we know we don't have to match anyone's energy. We can create our own. And that's the heart of it. Responding puts us in the driver's seat. It allows us to show up with clarity, to honor our values, and to influence others without being controlled by them. It gives us the power to break the cycle of conflict and replace it with understanding. Not because the other person is easy, but because we've chosen a better way to meet the challenge. And that is the quiet, consistent power that changes everything. Kindness and boundaries are not opposites. They work best together. This is a truth that many people struggle to understand, often believing that being kind means always saying yes, always being available, always accommodating others no matter the cost. But that's not kindness. That's self-abandonment. Real kindness, the kind that heals, strengthens, and endures, is rooted in clarity, and clarity requires boundaries. The idea that we have to choose between being kind and being firm is a false choice. The most powerful relationships, the most peaceful lives, and the strongest individuals are those who have learned to blend compassion with self-respect. We often confuse kindness with pleasing people. We think we're being generous when we agree to things we don't want to do, or when we stay silent to avoid conflict. But that kind of kindness has a short shelf life. It builds resentment, it drains energy, and it teaches others that our needs are optional. A boundary by contrast, this is what I'm okay with. This is what I'm not. When delivered with calm and respect, a boundary is not a rejection of the other person. It's a recognition of the themselves. It says, I care about you, and I also care about me. People often fear setting boundaries because they think it will make them look cold or selfish. But boundaries are not walls. They are fences with gates. They define where you end and someone else begins. They allow you to give freely without feeling used, to listen without feeling overwhelmed, to love without losing yourself. When someone says no with honesty and grace, it's not unkind. It's actually a sign of trust. It means they value the relationship enough to be true. And when someone sets a boundary with you, it can feel uncomfortable, but it's also a gift. It shows they are willing to bring their whole self into the relationship, not just the part that keeps things smooth. Kindness without boundaries is like a river with no banks. It spills everywhere and eventually runs dry. Boundaries give our kindness direction. They let us for ourselves, because of people, and causes we care. Without those sparks spouts into people, and causes we care about. Consider the parent who never disciplines their child out of fear of seeming harsh. At first it may look like love, but over time it creates confusion, entitlement, and insecurity. Real love sets limits. It says, I want what's best for you, even if that means saying something you don't want to hear. The same applies in friendships, romantic relationships, and friendships. Without boundaries, kindness becomes a performance. With boundaries, it becomes a grounded choice. There's a deep strength in people who are both kind and boundaried. They don't shout, they don't blame, but they are clear. They're the ones who will help you when they can, but will also tell you honestly when they can't. They don't try to fix everyone's problems, and they don't take responsibility for things that aren't theirs. Yet you always feel respected in their presence. Why? Because they respect themselves first. And that self-respect becomes the foundation for every interaction they have. The key is in how we set boundaries. Tone matters. Intention matters. A boundary set in anger is often heard as punishment. A boundary set in anger is often hurt. A boundary set with calm is more likely to be received as truth. Saying I need some time to myself doesn't have to come with guilt. Saying I can't take that on right now
Doesn't mean you don't see ability, capacity.
and don't squeeze. It says who might your capacity. And honesty delivered with compassion is one of the highest forms of kindness. It builds trust. It shows maturity. It teaches others how to engage with us in a healthy way. Remy Brown, a researcher on vulnerability, compassion wonders that falls compassionate people she's ever met will also That might sound surprising, but it makes perfect sense. People who honor their own limits are less likely to become resentful. They don't give from an empty cup. They don't give. They don't make. It comes from a full heart, not from pressure or fear or guilt. It comes from a full heart. That's the kind of kindness that has staying power. Think about the people in your life who've made you feel safe. Chances are they were kind but not bad. They listened but they chose. They made space for you but they didn't disappear to do. That balance is rare, but it's learnable. And it starts by changing the way we think about kindness. Being kind does not mean avoiding discomfort. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is to have a difficult conversation, to express a need, to walk away from a toxic situation. Kindness says, I care about you. In practice, this balance looks like taking a moment before committing to something. It looks like telling a friend, I want to support you, but I also need rest tonight. Can I commit till tomorrow? It looks like saying no. It looks like saying no without needing. It looks like forgiving someone, but still choosing not to let them back into a part of your life where they've done harm. These aren't acts of cruelty, they are acts of wisdom. And when practiced consistently, people that you are safe and strong, that your kindness has a spine. This combination of kindness and boundaries is what allows relationships to thrive over time. It prevents burnout. It reduces misunderstandings. It encourages open honesty. It reduces misalignment. It invites respect.
not just affection.
And perhaps most importantly, it gives us the space to be fully human.
To give when we can, fully take it.
In a world that often tells us to pick a side, to be soft or strong, kind or firm, we forget that the venture they lead with heart and stand with strength. They lead with heart and stand with strength. They don't bend to please, but they don't push to dominate. They simply live with alignment, true to themselves, respectful. And in that alignment, they become a quiet. So the next time you hesitate to set a boundary because you fear it's unkind, remember this: the most enduring kind of not just the other person's comfort, but also your own truth. Not just their needs, but also your limits. That's not selfish, that's sustainable. And in the long run, it's the kind of kindness the world needs more of. You said